everybody. It is July 1st, 2025. You're more than halfway through the year, and you've been listening to the Mo News podcast for the first half of this year, and you kick off the second half of this year with us. So thank you for listening. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. First thing I want to do on today's podcast is wish our friends across the northern border a happy Canada Day.
Yes, a happy Canada Day to all. And we have some Canada news in the podcast today.
Yeah, some positive news for Canada. We should note on this day in 1867, the Dominion of Canada was officially formed. It has since become Canada Day. It began with Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and the future provinces of Ontario and Quebec. Though there are many people in Quebec that would like to be independent from Canada, Jill, but they haven't quite made that happen yet.
Okay, well, we will celebrate Canada Day, seeing as how Canada not looking like it's going to become the 51st state anytime soon.
No, despite Trump said it again this week. He's like, it'd be great. They should just become our 51st state. Well, they're celebrating their independence again today, and it appears based on the latest polling in Canada, it's like upwards of like 85%, almost 90% Canadians are like, yeah, no, we're good. We're good being our own country. Thank you very much.
All right, let's get to the headlines here. The latest on the big, beautiful bill and whether it passed the Senate. Plus, where have all the moderates gone? With Republican North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis announcing that he will not run for re-election after voting against the bill. There will be fewer lawmakers willing to work across the aisle. We do a state of play. All right, then to the tragedy in Idaho, where we have learned the identity of the gunman who targeted and killed Idaho firefighters in a sniper-style attack, and some new details about it. Plus, trade talks with Canada back on after Canada agreed to drop a tax that would have cost American companies more than $2 billion. We'll tell you why a trade deal is so crucial for our northern neighbor. And as we celebrate 4th of July this week, a new study finds fewer people are proud to be an American, although the numbers really do vary depending on your political party.
Yeah, really. It's the Democrats and the Independents. The Republicans still sky-high pride.
A new detention center for undocumented migrants dubbed Alligator Alcatraz set to open today in Florida. President Trump set to visit. And a lottery oops. Norway's gambling operator mistakenly told thousands of people that they had won a lot of money in the lottery. It turns out they did win, but only enough to buy a coffee. Moshe, those people already had some big plans.
Big plans, big purchases. Sorry about that, everybody. We'll explain what happened in Norway. It had to do with math being complicated. Jill.
Move the decimal point. Keep going. Keep going. And Moshe is on the same history.
There's no crying in baseball. That phrase becomes famous on this day.
Okay, let's start with the latest on the Senate vote on President Trump's big, beautiful bill.
Jill, I'm filing this update for you just before 1 a.m. Eastern time as the debate continues on the Senate floor. This is over Trump's sweeping domestic policy package. It's been moving through the Senate. It affects virtually every American, overhauling taxes, healthcare, and energy policy. They've been taking vote after vote all night. This is typically how the Senate handles its business. And it doesn't look like a final vote is going to happen until about 4 a.m. Eastern time. So we will wake up and find out whether Republicans were able to vote this through or whether it was rejected overnight. As of this recording, it's looking like a razor-thin margin. We know 2 Republicans are set to vote no on this based on the 53-47 majority Republicans have. They can handle 3 no votes, and then J.D. Vance is the tiebreaker. But if they get to 4 no votes, that will be a rejection of the bill. Trump is watching this. We've been watching his social media feed as he's been posting about this. And so the question is, to what extent will he have to be involved in the wee hours of Tuesday morning to try to get this legislation through? His priority is July 4th. He has set a July 4th deadline. There's nothing to it more than he just wants it done by Friday. The law renews his tax cuts from 2017. They're set to expire this year. This bill would make them permanent. But in order to pay for them, the bill includes steep cuts to Medicaid, food aid programs, clean energy funding. The package is nearly 1,000 pages. It includes new legislation on a variety of issues, including artificial intelligence, space exploration, immigration. Now, the big thing is, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, over the next 10 years, the legislation would cause revenues for the government to decrease with these tax cuts by about $4.5 trillion, but it only cuts spending by about $1 trillion, which means the national debt will increase by about $3 trillion, which is a big issue for conservatives. At the center of this bill is Trump's 2017 tax cuts. They were set to expire this year, but they will be extended permanently as part of this law. This also there's a lot in here. It's a couple $1 trillion worth of stuff. This bill will allow individuals to deduct up to $25,000 for tip wages, $12,500 for overtime. Now, the Senate has added that it only applies if you make less than $150,000 a year. The child tax credit is also set to return to previous levels, permanently increasing to $2,200, according to the latest Senate version of the bill. It had decreased in recent years. There's also provisions here in regards to defense spending, to immigration spending, AI. There's a 5-year moratorium. No state can regulate AI for the next 5 years. That was put in there to try to make AI more competitive with China, and it basically allow tech companies to do whatever they want to do here, though obviously there are a lot of concerns about that provision, among other things. Now, to pay for all of it, everything in this bill, there are a lot of cuts, and that's where there's a lot of controversy here. The most controversial of which is the Medicaid cuts. This is one of the reasons why some Republicans have been against this, because both Republicans and Democrats both get Medicaid here. Medicaid is offered to folks at a lower income level. But again, Republicans were looking for cuts here. Now, ultimately, this is set to increase the debt by several $1 trillion. And so included in this bill is the debt ceiling being raised by $5 trillion. Now, the previous House version had it being raised by $4 trillion. So that's going to potentially create issues here down the road. There's also the end of a bunch of Biden-era clean energy tax credits. We talked about that on the podcast yesterday. A lot of folks, including Elon Musk, very concerned about that is going to basically allow the Chinese to lock up things like wind energy and solar energy in a way and make us very non-competitive when it comes to the clean energy future. The focus of this bill really on oil and coal and other things like that. There's also a SALT deduction. This is specific to a state and local tax. Blue states like New York, this is particularly relevant to people now get their deduction back on their taxes in high tax states where you pay a high state income tax in addition to the federal tax. And so a lot here on this bill. We should remind you, it's about 1,000 pages long.
Right, and senators held a marathon series of rapid-fire votes on amendment known as Vote-a-Rama Monday ahead of the final vote. Now, there's no limit to the number of amendments that lawmakers could seek. The Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, had promised that his party would bring amendment after amendment after amendment during the marathon session. Democrats also forced a word-by-word reading of that nearly 1,000-page bill over the weekend. It took about 16 hours.
Yeah, the poor clerks in the Senate had to literally read it all night long. There's clips we posted on Instagram. Several of them lost their voices, Jill. But we should note they probably are now more familiar with the bill than some senators are, who we know typically there's always a few, sometimes a lot, of representatives and senators who don't actually read the bill that they're voting on. Then they get to say later, I didn't know that was in the bill.
Plausible deniability. Is that what that's called?
It's just really long. It was 1,000 pages.
So those are among the delay tactics that the minority party has in the Senate. It's something Republicans have done in the past as well. When they were not in control, many of the votes were on Democratic proposals that have little hope of passing, that were intended by Democrats to inflict political pain on Republicans, like getting them to vote for or against measures that they could spin into campaign ads during the midterms next year. Some of the measures could actually reshape the package, including one from GOP Senator Rick Scott of Florida that would dramatically cut even more from Medicaid. Conservative Republicans have pressed for more last-second cuts to the bill. They argue that they can't support the bill unless it has bigger spending cuts as a way to curb the federal deficits. Democrats also are harshly criticizing Republicans for employing a budget maneuver that they say violates Senate rules. And also they say it's hiding the true impact of the bill's tax cuts on the federal debt. Republicans say the Trump tax cuts from 2017 that are being renewed in the bill shouldn't actually be counted when you add up how much is being added to the debt.
Yeah, so Democrats calling that bad math, that by that logic, the nearly $4 trillion cost of extending the tax cuts here is zero, and those cuts could be extended for decades, even though they mean trillions in lost revenue for the government, forcing the government to take out loans to pay for things, hence the debt. So Republicans are like, well, no, we're going to zero that out because it's been around for a few years. Democrats are like, no, that actually is lost revenue for the government. How are you going to make up for it? But loans. So ultimately, here the chamber had to vote on it. They voted 53 to 47. That's the party split, Republican and Democrat, to disregard the Democratic challenge on the Republican view on how to estimate the cost here. So by viewing the cost of the bill that way, zeroing out the tax cuts and the trillions that the government won't be getting, again, Republicans now actually get to say that the bill saves money if they just take out the whole sort of annoying tax cut thing. So just FYI, as you hear the spin from folks, you're going to hear Republicans saying this actually saves the country money. Democrats are going to say, no, the tax cuts are a thing, and we now need to take out loans to pay for things. So there's funny math always being played here as the various parties try to pass their legislation. This one for the Republicans, I have to say, pretty extreme maneuver on their end. And there are some Republicans internally who've dismissed this estimate privately.
So the entire Senate Republican bill relies on this view of the tax cuts costs. Without the accounting assumption, the legislation would really run afoul of Senate rules and require Republicans to rework the entire 940-page bill, which President Trump has demanded be ready for his signature by Friday, July 4th. Now, remember, in order to get to the president's desk, the Senate and the House have to pass the same bill, and the Senate made a bunch of changes to their version since they got it from the House back in May. So the bill, once it passes the Senate, goes back to the House for members to consider those changes. Already, the House Freedom Caucus, which is a group of hardcore conservatives, is saying the Senate version of the bill is, quote, not what we agreed to. They are concerned about how much it could add to the deficit. House Republican leaders say that Wednesday is the earliest chance for a vote on the bill in the lower chamber.
Yeah, and remember, the House passed it 215 to 214 by one vote. And so Speaker Johnson has his work cut out for him, especially since Trump has created this deadline of Friday. There's no real reason for the deadline besides Trump wants it done by the 4th of July. And so we'll see if the House can make good on that. It's going to be extremely challenging. You know, that House Freedom Caucus you mentioned, Jill, has 30 members, and they'll need effectively all 30 of them to support this. So what potential changes do they need to make? And remember, if they make a single change, like a comma or semicolon or whatever, it then has to go back over to the Senate. And the senators typically, after a vote, they're on vacation for July 4th. They have no interest in going back. So the House really has to try to force this through. Now, one thing that came up during our internal Mo News meetings today was the handful of Republicans who have opposed the legislation. That includes Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. We talked about him yesterday. He announced on Sunday he's not seeking re-election in 2026. He was one of two Republicans who opposed getting the bill to sort of the final stages of a vote in the Senate. I had a number of issues when it came to Medicaid and how the White House is approaching that. And Tillis, through the years, has a handful of times actually defied Republican orthodoxy, and particularly President Trump. And that led to this whole dispute over the weekend where Trump said, if you vote against me, I'm going to put someone up against you. You're not loyal enough. And to which Tillis said, you know what, you can take this Senate job and shove it. I'm done here. I'm not running for re-election next year. Now, his planned departure really reinforces what we've seen happen in recent years when it comes to the moderates. What happened to the moderates? What happened to the Republicans and Democrats who were willing to cross party lines to vote on things that they believe were good for the people of their state and not just good for their party? We talked about Mitt Romney. You know, he was there until last year. He was a more moderate Republican from Utah. Also, we saw last year the departure of Joe Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia, who would, to the frustration of Democrats, cross party lines and vote with Republicans. Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, another one. And we can go on and on here. Now, there are a handful left, and they're particularly relevant in this vote. Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, a Republican who sometimes defies Trump. Susan Collins of Maine, sometimes who defies Trump. Mitch McConnell is now in the doesn't care anymore stage, so he sometimes defies Trump. But that's typically all you see these days when it comes to senators or members of the House willing to defy their party. It's when they've announced they're not running for re-election anymore and they don't need to win the sort of core of the party. That's when they actually feel comfortable voting in the way that they feel is right for the constituents. and themselves.
And recent studies, Moshe, found that both parties are now farther apart ideologically than in the past 50 years. Importantly, moderates, there are about 24 in Congress, have dwindled from more than 160 in the early 1970s based on a scoring of their votes, defying their party, etc. So that's a big drop that we've got about 24, give or take, currently. And you had 7 times that many just a few decades ago.
Yeah, we're probably being generous now with 24. It's probably down to like closer to 12. And 160, that means that like you're talking about nearly a quarter of the House and Senate about 50 years ago were willing to defy their party on a regular basis. And you've gone from a quarter of the House and Senate to like literally 5%, less than that, depending on the body these days. And the thing is, without middle of the ground senators willing to broker deals, that has led to this legislative paralysis. So it helps explain the backdrop of the Supreme Court decisions we've seen recently, where effectively the Supreme Court is saying, well, Congress doesn't do anything, so let's give the executive more power here. And acknowledging the reality of a paralyzed Congress. Now, members of Congress will be like, no, we still do stuff. Like, look at this thing we did. Look at that other thing we did. But ultimately not at the level that we saw decades ago. And it'll be an interesting race to watch, Jill, this North Carolina race, because ultimately, who will the parties put up? And will it be somebody who is willing to sort of follow in the Tillis tradition here? One person people are looking at in North Carolina, particularly Democrats, is Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina. He has, by becoming governor of North Carolina, which is a very purple to red state, as a Democrat, had to strike deals with his legislature. So is that an argument that Democrats will buy? And is that an argument that overall voters will buy next year? And, that's something that I know many of you in the Mo News community are constantly asking about. What's happened? Well, what's happened is us. We're the problem, right? How does Taylor Swift say it, Jill?
It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me.
It's me. It's us. And it's us who aren't voting in primaries, 1. Or 2, those of us who are voting in primaries, voting sort of for the most extreme candidate that we feel will not compromise with that other side, will stand by everything that I want. And so oftentimes you see coming out of the primary process that the parties hold, this sort of more right-wing or more left-wing candidate, leaving voters in the general election who wake up in the general being like, wait, these are my choices. Who am I going with here? And so that is ultimately one of the problems we face. And this Tom Tillis example is sort of the latest example of what we're seeing.
I do want to quickly mention there is still the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is chaired by Representative Tom Suozzi. He is a Democrat from Long Island. And
he's your congressman.
He is my congressman. He was there before George Santos and after George Santos.
Is that how you talk about things now on Long Island? There's like
yes.
BGS and AGS. Yeah.
And then there is Representative Brian Fitzpatrick. He is a Republican from Pennsylvania. They describe themselves as a group of congressional members that are split between Republicans and Democrats, committed to advancing common sense solutions to key issues facing our nation. And they say that they sit down every week to debate, exchange ideas, and find common ground.
Yeah, there was also a group of Democrats called the Blue Dog Democrats in the 90s, early 2000s. There used to be about 50 of them. And these are Democrats who are more fiscally and socially conservative and sometimes voted with the other side. At its peak, Jill, when I covered Congress for Fox News back in the late 2000s, there were about 50 of them. Today, I think there's like less than 10. And ultimately, it just goes to show also how the districts are being drawn in each state. And again, the primary process, electing the more liberal members and also the more conservative members. In many cases, these blue dog districts have been redrawn in red states to basically block out a Democrat.
Time for the speed read from CNN, the latest on the tragic sniper-style ambush against 2 firefighters in Idaho late Sunday evening. Authorities have confirmed the identity of the suspect who intentionally set a fire and then waited for those firefighters to arrive before shooting and killing 2 of them and injuring a 3rd person. The shooter was 20-year-old Wes Rowley. Officers exchanged gunfire with the suspect. His body was later found on northern Idaho's Canfield Mountain near Coeur d'Alene. Authorities have not detailed how he died, whether it was in the shootout or by a self-inflicted shot, but they did find him with a weapon close by. About 300 law enforcement officials were part of the response, including multiple agencies from neighboring counties and the FBI. Law enforcement located the gunman by tracing his cell phone signal. Investigators are now working to understand Rowley's motivations for starting a brush fire and then shooting at the responding firefighters. They're looking at whether he had some sort of conflict with local law enforcement or just broader world views like anti-law enforcement or anti-government leanings, which could have led him to plan this attack.
Yeah, apparently even his family was taken by surprise here. His grandfather speaking to NBC saying he's very surprised by this. In fact, when they first heard his name associated with the attack, they thought that he was a volunteer trying to help people out. And they were shocked, at least the family says publicly to the media, that he was the alleged attacker here. He had recently moved from Arizona to Idaho to work in logging, though he had apparently ambitions, according to his grandfather, to be a firefighter. So he's not sure, the family isn't sure whether he may have been rejected, potentially, or what flipped here for him, leading him to conduct this horrific attack against first responders. We've received a number of messages from people in our Mo News community about how deeply the community there of Coeur d'Alene, where the firefighters hailed from, has been impacted by the attack. Jill, we posted a video yesterday on Instagram of the procession, the very miles-long procession where first responders were taking the bodies, the remains of the two firefighters who were killed. Jill, I should note there's audio of the firefighters as they responded and then realizing that they were being shot at and watching a couple of their colleagues going down. Really, obviously frantic audio. I know some news outlets have played it. We have it available, but we're going to choose not to play it for the purposes of this podcast.
Yeah, it's just a little too heartbreaking, actually.
You're hearing literally the firefighters, urgently calling for law enforcement backup as they realize that they are purposefully being shot at. And I'll just leave it there. The investigation is going to be complicated here by the fact that due to the fire, investigators could not preserve the scene as they normally would. And so they had to try to scoop up evidence before the fire could destroy it. Now, arson investigators say that people commit arson for a variety of reasons. But of course, this is not just arson, but also murder. And so they're going to try to get into the mind of this guy who, again, they're not sure whether he was shot in the back and forth with law enforcement or took his own life. Jill, staying with some news out of Idaho here. I want to get to some surprising headlines in the murder of those 4 college students in Idaho a couple of years ago. Many of you have been watching this legal case unfold very closely. Prosecutors announcing last night that Brian Kohberger, the man charged in the brutal stabbings of 4 University of Idaho students back in 2022, has reached a plea deal with prosecutors to avoid the death penalty. Kohberger had actually been set to go on trial just next month for the murders, nearly 3 years after the killings. They occurred at a residence near the university. Kohberger's defense team had actually tried in recent months to undermine key pieces of evidence, but ultimately prosecutors say that they found his DNA on a knife sheath recovered at the crime scene. He apparently had purchased a knife of that kind, matching the sheath in the months before the killings. Video footage also shows a car similar to his circling the neighborhood around the time of the deaths. So there was DNA evidence, there was circumstantial evidence, and it appears here that he has decided to go with the plea deal. And so what does that mean? Well, he pleads guilty, no chance of parole at any time in his life. So this is life in prison without parole. But prosecutors here have dropped the potential to go for the death penalty during sentencing. So this is all set to happen in a couple of weeks here. But some of the families of the victims here, including the family of Kaylee Gonsalves, apparently not happy with this plea agreement. The family taking to Facebook saying they are beyond, quote, furious with the state of Idaho. They have failed us, they said, referring to the state of Ohio. Please give us some time. This was very unexpected. And then they put out a subsequent statement, again, going after the prosecutors here for not looping them in. And their feeling is that they weren't given proper attention. Their hopes of what they were looking for out of a potential trial here was not addressed effectively by the prosecutors. So significant developments out of Idaho on that case as well.
From CNBC, the U.S. is restarting trade negotiations with Canada after Canada scrapped its digital services tax, which targeted U.S. technology companies. This tax led President Trump late last week to completely suspend trade talks with Canada and call for more tariffs. Canada, by the way, the U.S.'s second largest trading partner. The digital services tax was first introduced in 2020 to address a taxation gap where a lot of large tech companies were earning significant revenues from Canadians, but they weren't taxed, and it was set to go into effect immediately. The first payments from Canada's digital services tax were initially set to be collected Monday. The tax would have applied to both domestic and foreign tech companies, including U.S. giants like Amazon, Google, and Meta. So they would have been taxed 3%. It was estimated that American companies would have to pay about $2.7 billion to the Canadian government had the tax gone into effect. So the decision from Canada to drop the tax was a 180 from their position earlier last month when they said they absolutely would not be pausing that digital services tax despite strong opposition from the United States.
So the tax here had become the latest flashpoint, and so you saw Trump on Friday being like, you don't drop that tax, I end negotiations, I'm going to increase tariffs. You wake up Monday and Canada's like, okay, we've dropped the tax. So this reinforces the White House argument here that the tariff threats and the Trump negotiation strategy is effective. And ultimately here you have negotiations between the Canadians and the U.S. on multiple levels here. Trump had called the tax a blatant attack on the U.S. And we should note that Democrats in the past in the U.S. have been frustrated by this tax that many of these American tech companies that are basically ubiquitous worldwide, that a number of other countries are basically trying to make money off of it. But those countries would argue that companies like Amazon and others are taking business away from shops and businesses in their own country, hence the tax. So ultimately here, Mark Carney, the prime minister in Canada, says the cancellation of the tax will put trade talks back on track. Their goal right now is to reach a deal by the 21st of this month. And we've been watching all of this unfold. Trump imposing a 25% tariff on most goods from Canada, and then Canada responding with their own tariffs. And so ultimately here, we'll see what comes of it. But $760 billion in goods and trade happens between these two countries. So it is super important for the U.S., but even more important for Canada, given how much Canada relies on the U.S.
From the Associated Press, this July 4th week, as the U.S. turns 249 years old, national pride in being an American is on the decline. According to a new Gallup poll, only 36% of Democrats say that they are, quote, extremely or very proud to be an American. That is down from 62% just last year.
I wonder if an election had to do with that, Jill.
It is the second time that fewer than half of Democrats have said that they were proud to be American since the survey began. The first was during 2020, in which the Gallup survey was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic and shortly after the murder of George Floyd.
And then it appears pride, at least among Democrats, started to tick up over the last 4 years.
Meanwhile, the vast majority of Republicans continue to say that they are proud to be American. Pride among Republicans has increased over the past year, with 92% of Republicans saying that they are proud to be an American in 2025. Up from 85% in 2024, Republicans have consistently ranked above Democrats in political independence when it comes to American pride since that survey began. The split between Democrats and Republicans at 56 percentage points is at its widest since 2001. Again, Republicans at 92% and Democrats at 36%. Now, among political independents, just over half, about 53% of respondents said that they were extremely or very proud to be an American. It is still a majority, but down from 60% in 2024 and also a record low.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, Jill. So they've been asking this question over the course of, and this feels old, but over the course of the century, since 2000. And even during those early years of the Iraq War that led to major political disputes here in the U.S., about 9 in 10 American adults, both Democrats and Republicans, were extremely or very proud to be an American. But the consensus around American pride slipped in the years that followed, dropping to 8 in 10 in 2006, and then continuing the gradual decline, especially over this last decade. So what played a role in it? Certainly certain politicians, certainly social media, a whole variety of things have happened here over the course of the past 15 to 20 years. to go from 9 in 10 Americans to basically 5 in 10 Americans, especially as you've seen that huge collapse among Democrats and independents. They also look at this number generationally. Only about 4 in 10 U.S. adults who are part of Gen Z, 40% or so, expressed a high level of pride in being an American. So this is everyone born between 1997 and 2012. That's compared to about 6 in 10 millennials and 7 in 10 Gen Xers and boomers. So the younger you are, it continues to sort of collapse as well. So we see both a political divide and we see a generational divide. Jill, we put up the chart over on Instagram, and you can see how the lines change over the years, particularly Republicans sort of bumping down to like 86%, then back up to 92%. The Democrats, you see sort of a collapse over the course of the past 20 years with sort of a jump up during Biden and then a collapse again when Trump gets elected. Independents, pretty much a steady decline over the years.
Moshe, there are some analysts who say that one of the big issues in terms of American pride and feeling good about being an American is TikTok, that it is very easy for the Chinese Communist Party to kind of lean a little bit heavy on content that makes young people in particular feel bad about being American and sows political division. And it is one of the reasons that some people have called for a ban of TikTok.
Yes, obviously the trend line predates TikTok, but you do see that escalation. You definitely see it generationally. Certainly it would not be, certainly it is in the Chinese government interest to make us feel crappy about our own country. At the same time, I think young people would say, well, look at income inequality at record high levels. Look at the, especially if you're, Democrat pro-choice, the overturn of Roe v. Wade, and they'll point to a number of things over the course of the past year. They're like, well, why should I be extremely proud to be an American? Like, I'm not proud of certain things happening here or over our government that can't, accomplish certain things, over insurance, all the variety of complaints one might have. And so they track that to pride in the country. And I think what you're getting at is like, can you distinguish who the president is or certain policy issues you have with pride in the country? But some people, sort of plug them in with one another and saying, well, if this is the state of my country, I am not proud to be an American. To which the other side would say, well, then go somewhere else. And to all of that, I'll say, I think it's actually possible to separate the country from its politics. For one, I will say I'm extremely proud to be an American. On one side, my father is an immigrant who came here with very little, was able to build businesses, buy a home, have his kids go to college, opportunities that he did not have. And that's not possible in many countries as an immigrant. On the other side of my family, my mother's father came here as a refugee escaping Nazi Germany. He joined the U.S. Armed Forces, went to college on the GI Bill, became an architect. So I think there's a lot to be proud of as an American, of the opportunities that we afford, especially when it comes to immigrants. They tend to say they're the most proud to be an American because, of course, they have something to compare it to. Now, I will say, you mentioned the U.S. about to turn 249 years old this week, the first modern democracy in a world of monarchies, in dictatorships. We built a system here, albeit an imperfect one, a very imperfect one that we seek to improve on constantly, that became an example to the world over the course of the last 2.5 centuries. I don't think people understand how unique we were, especially as the founders were developing this idea of a democracy in a world of monarchies, and the uniqueness of America that still stands today. Do we have problems? Absolutely. Is there a lot to fix in this country? Yes. Do we go backwards at time? Sure. But I don't see why that doesn't make you still proud to be an American. I think part of being proud to be an American is that you fight to make this country better, however you think it needs to improve. So, I think it's important to draw a distinction between the politics and just overall what a country has accomplished and what a country can be. And for those reasons, I will say that I am extremely or very proud to be an American.
From NBC News, President Trump is expected to be at the formal opening today of a controversial immigration detention center in the Florida Everglades that state leaders have dubbed, quote, Alligator Alcatraz. The facility is on a little-used airstrip in Florida's Miami-Dade County that Governor Ron DeSantis' administration seized using emergency powers to build a housing facility for undocumented migrants. DeSantis issued an emergency order focused on immigration in early 2023, and he has since then extended it multiple times. The measure gives him significant authority to take actions like seizing land Some local political leaders in Miami-Dade County opposed DeSantis when he wanted to take the land for the Everglades-based detention center. The facility could house as many as 5,000 undocumented migrants, and it was set up in just 1 week. Environmental groups sued to block the site on Friday. They argue it could have a devastating effect on the Everglades. They say the site is more than 97% wetlands. It's surrounded by Big Cypress National Preserve, and it's a habitat for the endangered Florida panther, American flamingos, crocodiles, and manatees. The Department of Homeland Security has called it a, quote, lazy lawsuit, citing the fact that the airstrip where the detention facility sits has been there for years. It's also being opposed by Native American tribes in the area. The homes of several tribes and their ceremonial sites surround the detention center on 3 sides. Hundreds of people turned out over the weekend to protest the construction of the facility.
So this facility, again, they're dubbing it Alligator Alcatraz, has been hyped as the highest profile example of Florida's push to be the state that is most aggressive when it comes to enforcement of immigration law. That's cooperating with the Trump administration. We've talked about the numbers of where you've seen the most deportations. Florida is one of them. Now, critics here call this a stunt, doing this in the wetlands. The Florida is a very big state, and they say you could find other places to use these facilities, but I think DeSantis very much likes the optics of this. He took Fox and Friends, the morning show, on a tour of it last week. One of the concerns here, this rapid construction, just over a week, to build a facility means they often overlook vital infrastructure. It results in sanitation, overcrowding, other potential issues. This site is actually very interesting if you're from Florida or South Florida or interested in the history here. They initially had plans to build the world's largest airport on this site. They had 6 runways planned, but ultimately the governor at the time in the 1960s was convinced that this would damage the Everglades, so they stopped construction, but not before they built one runway, which has been used as a training ground for pilots and is now going to be used by this detention facility. Now, this facility is estimated to cost upwards of $500 million a year. It's been approved by the Department of Homeland Security. The feds say they will reimburse the state for this facility, but obviously this has gotten a lot of attention, and this could raise a lot of money for the Republican Party of Florida, which has already started selling branded merchandise with Alligator Alcatraz on it.
And finally, from The Guardian, close to 50,000 people in Norway thought that they hit it big in the lottery last week, but what seemed like a stroke of luck did not hold. Apparently, messages about their winnings had been sent by mistake. This is according to a state-owned gambling company. Norway's gambling operator, Norsk Tipping, made the math error. So how could this have happened, Moshe? The company receives prize amounts from Germany in euros, which are then converted to Norwegian krona. When that conversion was made, a manual error was made so that people's winnings were multiplied by 100 when they actually should have been divided by 100.
Multiplication, division, 2 different things.
So that meant that a number of people who were told that they won the equivalent of 1.2 million krona or 100,000 US dollars actually won 120 krona or $10. The inflated sums were displayed on the company's website and mobile app on Friday, but then they were removed. Norsk Tipping confirmed no incorrect payouts were made. The company held an emergency meeting with the Ministry of Culture on Saturday to explain the incident, and the company's chief executive resigned over the mistake. Several Norwegians who thought they had won have said they already started to celebrate before they discovered the mistake. Some say they were making plans to buy cars or take vacations before they realized, nope, that was just about $10, not quite as much as they had planned for.
Congrats, you have won $10, not $100,000. Sorry about the error. I hope you didn't, make any major financial decisions in your life based on that. So the CEO of the lottery company has resigned. They acknowledge that trust has been broken, and the company execs that remain say they're determined to clean up and improve themselves. First and foremost, learning the difference between division and multiplication before posting them on the website. Now, this isn't just isolated to Norway. There have been various lottery mistakes through the years. Most recently in Iowa, here in the U.S., they posted the wrong Powerball numbers a few years ago due to a human reporting error. But they did say that they allowed those people whose tickets matched the wrong numbers to keep their prizes because the prizes, Jill, were between $4 and $200. So Iowa did that. Now, there is a man who has a lawsuit, and I think he needs to refile this, out of D.C., who has sued Powerball over a $340 million prize back in 2023 after the lottery website displayed his numbers as the winning combination by mistake. Apparently, Powerball had accidentally posted test winning lotto numbers on the live public website by mistake. He caught it. He thought he won $340 million. Turns out he did not. So he's been engaged in a whole lawsuit here for a couple of years. They've thrown it out based on jurisdictional issues. We'll see what happens to this guy. All right, now time for On This Day in History. On this day in 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg, one of the most important battles that would lead to a Union victory, ultimately began. Gettysburg was the last real attempt that Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general, would make to try to invade the North and take parts of the Union. But of course, one of the deadliest battles of the Civil War. And it would last for 2 more years before the ultimate Union victory. On this day in 1867, I mentioned the Dominion of Canada was formed. So happy Canada Day to all of you who are celebrating today by listening to the Mo News podcast. On this day in 1963, the U.S. Postal Service instituted the ZIP code, or the Zone Improvement Plan code, to try to better organize how mail was distributed. So if you were born before this day in 1963, Jill, you are older than the zip code. On this day in 1979, Sony began selling the Walkman, the portable cassette player. International sensation changed the way we could listen to music for the first time. We could listen to music on the go as we walked around. And some movie history for you on this day. The answer to the clue at the top. On this day in 1992, A League of Their Own premiered in theaters. Tom Hanks, Madonna, Rosie O'Donnell, a whole variety of folks, and many famous lines, including Tom Hanks's as the manager. There's no crying in baseball.
Moshe, I like that movie the more I watch it, actually. Another great line. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great.
That's a good line. That's a good line for kids.
It's a good line for everyone. A reminder, the good stuff, it takes work.
And one other movie out on this day, 27 years ago, Armageddon, premiered in theaters.
A movie I think I like less every time I see it. I feel like it's just so unreal. When I watched it, I was like, oh, this could totally happen.
Well, now we have the technology, Jill. We don't need Bruce Willis and his team anymore. We have developed the technology. We covered it on this podcast last year to knock a meteor or an asteroid off its path just enough. At least we believe so. We haven't been fully tested. We did have that scare last year where we had like a 1% chance of being hit by a asteroid. We covered that heavily. Now, I think there's like a small percent chance that it could hit the moon, but we're good again. Though a number of you wrote in, like, I'm sort of rooting for us to get hit by an asteroid.
At this rate. Put us out of our misery.
It's the last to put us out of our misery, or at least try to bring the world together. And the only thing that can potentially bring the world together at this point is aliens or an asteroid, I guess.
It's a pretty good point. Maybe like a just miss, right? Like it brings us all together. Everyone's okay, but we can now.
But then there's going to be the truthers who are like, it was never going to hit us anyway. It was just a government conspiracy to get us to do something. You can see how this is going to go in this day and age. They're going to be the denialists. I mean, there's people who literally still believe like the Earth is flat and we never went to space, right? Never went to the moon. So God knows.
Okay. Good talk.
Let's stay optimistic. Well, good talk.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast on this first day of July. As Moshe likes to point out, we're more than halfway done with 2025 and cruising towards 2026.
And we're closer to 2050 than the year 2000.
There you go.
That's the bigger one.
All right. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It helps us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And those reviews in the App Store really matter. So a kind review, we would much appreciate.
Appreciate all of you listening on this holiday week. See you tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.